Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, Gardening in Cold Spring Harbor. Welcome back to my home. Welcome back to Long Island, New York, Zone 7A. In today's video, we're going to talk about orchid care and orchid repotting tips. But not just any orchid, guys. We're going to talk about this stunner over here. We're going to talk about the Cattleya Orchid variety. I have 3 different Cattleya orchids right here in front of me in my green room. I have the light purple Cattleya, the blue Cattleya orchid variety, as well as the dark purple Cattleya orchid variety. So Cattleya orchids are not the typical orchids that we used to see in grocery stores or even garden centers. So the orchids that are widely sold in grocery stores or garden centers are the Phalaenopsis orchids, which I have right over here. And by the way, they're ready to bloom. They're going to open up and bloom for me any day, guys. Take a look for yourself. So the care as well as repotting of the Cattleya orchid differs quite a bit, especially the care tips. They differ quite a bit compared to the Phalaenopsis orchid care tips. In today's video, I'm going to specifically focus on the Cattleya orchids care as well as repotting tips. I have a video on my gardening channel, Gardening Cold Spring Harbor, where I give you step-by-step Phalaenopsis orchid care instructions as well as repotting tips and demonstration. For those of you who are interested in seeing that video as well, I'm going to link it up below and you can check that video out as well. Now let's get gardening. For those of you looking for their online gardening channel that offers tips, tricks, easy yet proven gardening advice to take your home gardens to that next level, don't go anywhere, guys. Stick around with me today. Start with going below this video and clicking the subscribe button. If you are enjoying the content of my garden videos, if you want YouTube to send you notifications every single time I upload a new garden video, click the bell icon as well. Now let's get started. Cattleya orchids are part of the epiphytic family. So what are epiphytes? They are those plants which in nature grow on tree trunks, tree branches, tree bark. So in Mother Nature, you will never find epiphytic plants growing in the ground, in the soil, especially not in any containers. Cattleya orchids are known for their large, beautiful blooms. Not only are the blooms just stunning, they're showstoppers, guys. They're also fragrant. So compared to some other orchid varieties, such as the Phalaenopsis orchid, where the blooms are also stunningly beautiful, but they're not fragrant. Wait till these stars bloom. Wait till you smell the fragrance of those blooms, guys. It is just out of this world. As I just mentioned, Cattleya orchids are epiphytes. So they do grow on trees, tree trunks, tree branches. So the difference between a Cattleya orchid and say a Phalaenopsis orchid is that Cattleya orchids do require quite a lot of light. Much more light than say a Phalaenopsis orchid. Why? Because these orchids in nature tend to grow on top of the trees. You will never ever find them scattered anywhere on the ground surface or on the bottom portion of the tree trunk. They're almost always on the mid to upper portions of the trees. Why? Because they are looking for that light. So now, just because they're growing on top of the tree doesn't mean that they get very bright, continuous, direct sunlight. The amount of sunlight that they get is still scattered, it's still dappled. But they do need more light versus some other orchid varieties. So if you guys do not have enough light for these orchids, enough sunlight in your home, then this orchid variety might not be the right orchid variety for you, because that amount of light will have direct impact on the foliage color, on the growth of your Cattleya orchid, as well as the amount and the sizing of your Cattleya orchid's blooms. If there's not enough light, you will not see that growth and you will not see that stunning fragrant bloom. As I previously mentioned, you will never find Cattleya orchids at the bottom of the tree trunk. They are seeking, they are looking for the light. So now, considering that we're growing them at home in pots or orchid containers, we must make sure that we will provide that adequate light that they so desperately need. Also, what you want to look for is that you want the foliage of your orchid to be pale colored. This paleness is absolutely fine. In fact, it is normal for this orchid variety versus other orchid varieties. Here I have my Phalaenopsis orchid. Take a look at the deep green foliage color versus this orchid, which has much more pale foliage color. That is absolutely fine. In fact, this pale foliage color signifies that the orchid is still healthy and happy, guys. So again, because Cattleyas are epiphytes, and now we are going to grow them in a pot or a container in our home, we have to make sure that the medium in which we're potting them will be open and porous. You can't plant Cattleyas or any other orchid variety for that matter in your standard potting mix. They're never going to thrive, they're never going to grow. The health of your Cattleya orchid heavily depends on the health of the root system, and the health of the root system will heavily depend on that medium in which you will pot your orchid. So now there are a few options. You can either choose a bark. Here is what orchid potting bark looks like. You can choose to pot it in sphagnum moss, which is right over here. Here's just one example of an orchid potting mix right over here. This is the Miracle Grow variety. You could choose any other brand, guys. It doesn't matter, but I want to show you something. Take a look over here. Coarse blend for epiphyte orchids, including Phalaenopsis, Cattleya, Epidendrum, etc. So this mix is specifically created and formulated for orchids, including Cattleya orchids. It helps the roots stay healthy, happy, and it's well draining. So you could choose between the bark or the sphagnum moss when planting your orchids, or you can combine the two in one pot or a container. And now let me go quickly into a bit of a depth, telling you what the difference between two of these mediums is, so you could choose the best option that works for you and for your home. So the first growing medium for our orchids would be the fir bark. Here's an example of what fir bark looks like. It needs to be nice, large, coarse. You do not want the bark to be just composed of tiny little pieces like this. This would be bark that is not fresh, that is starting to decompose. You want to see large pieces like this one. So now, the thing with the fir bark is that if you're growing your orchids in fir bark, you need to make sure that the bark thoroughly dries out prior to you re-watering your orchid. So it might seem a bit tricky at first, because if the color changes, you might think that the entire bark from top to bottom of your container is dry. In that case, you must use your finger, place your finger at least 1 inch to 2 inches into your container and feel for the moisture content. Trust me, guys, many times you will be very surprised to see that it's not dry at all, and that indeed the bottom half of your bark is very, very moist. And that is when we do not water orchids. Otherwise, we will overwater their root system. Here's our second medium, our second growing medium for our orchids. And that is our sphagnum moss. I opened up the package a little bit to show you guys what it looks like on the inside. It actually comes very, very dry. And you will have to moisten it quite significantly prior to placing it in a container with your orchid. The problem with this growing medium is that if you allow it to fully dry out, you're going to have a hard time properly re-moistening it in that container. So I do prefer to use the bark, the fur bark, as my growing medium for my orchids, or I intermix the two. So that perfect balance. So how often would you water your orchids? Whether you're growing them in the fur bark or you're growing them in the sphagnum moss. I water my orchids, all of my orchids, roughly once every 7 days, so once a week. You might get away with watering them once every 10 days even. The number of days will depend heavily on the air temperature, the humidity level, also the medium in which you're growing your orchids. I got these Cattleya orchids from my local Lowe's Garden Center a few days ago. I made a video for my gardening channel, Gardening Cold Spring Harbor, where I show you all of the houseplant steals and deals that my local Lowe's has now in the month of January 2024. I can't believe the bargain that I got on this beautiful, perfect looking Cattleya orchid. So now the only thing that is wrong with this orchid is the container in which it's potted currently. You could see that it's a plastic container with no air holes around it and barely any drainage holes on the bottom. This is not the container in which you should be growing any orchid plant, because going back to where they grow in nature, they need all that air circulating. So what is the right container for growing orchid plants? A container that has air holes throughout the entire 360-degree angle. Also, plenty of drainage holes on the bottom with that dip in the middle, water drainage dip. That is what distinguishes this container from any other potting container. This container is suited and meant for orchid growth. So you don't have to get a clear plastic container if it's not appealing looking to you, pretty looking. Orchid containers come in different shapes, sizes, and colors. Here's another example of an orchid container. This one's a ceramic orchid container. You could see all the air holes on it as well. You could see that it comes with a saucer on the bottom. Here's another example. This one's a larger one. You could see all the air holes as well, and you could see the saucer attached to the bottom as well. If you're growing your orchids in fur bark, you will have to repot your orchids once a year. Why? Because the bark breaks down and decomposes. You're going to see that the bark pieces will start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's not going to be the right medium for your orchids growth. If you are growing your orchids in sphagnum moss, you can get away with repotting your orchids roughly once every 2 years or so. However, you will see that the sphagnum moss will start to settle quite a bit. Its composition will be absolutely fine, but it's going to start to look as it's sinking towards the bottom of your pot or container. So you might need to add a bit more on top, close to a year into your orchids plant's growth, and that's absolutely fine, guys. So if you look at the bottom portion of our Cattleya orchid, you see that the stem starts to thicken quite a bit, and that's on each and every single one of them. So this thickening is called the bulb. And out of this bulb is where our flower stalks, flower stems will start to grow. You will also notice that each of these bulbs has this papery-like structure growing on it. It's brown colored, light brown. Here it is, guys. This is not a disease, guys. It's not an insect. It's not fungal. It's just a covering, a paper-like covering, which every single orchid will have on this bulb. So now, what are you going to need to repot your orchid today? Of course, you're going to need the orchid. You're going to need the new medium, the new grow medium. I'm going to be using the fir bark today. You're going to need clean scissors or pruning shears to trim off and remove any of the dead or dying roots on our orchid plants. You're going to need the new container, orchid suitable container, lots of air holes throughout the container, as well as plenty of drainage holes on the bottom. You're going to need a saucer or a bowl of some sort to place your container in for proper watering techniques. I labeled my container already over here. I attached the label to the front so I know which orchid is which, especially when it's not in full bloom. You will also need a tray, a bowl, a plate of some sort in order to collect the old growing medium from the existing container. What is the next step? You have to squeeze the sides of the old container like so with your fingers. Don't force it, guys. We do not want to cause any damage to the plant's root system. As you see, as you gently squeeze it, you're going to see that your plant will start to come right out with the old medium. And this is exactly the mess which I was referring to. Take a look, guys. This is quite funny, actually. They actually placed styrofoam on the bottom of this container. Funny is not the word here. Ridiculous is the word here. Why would you place chunks of styrofoam at the bottom of the container? No wonder that most of the times when you buy an orchid plant at a garden center or a grocery store, you bring it home and the plant is super unhappy. You see the blooms fade. It doesn't rebloom for you again. You see the foliage start to change color. Now you see why. They use the wrong containers and they place the wrong medium inside these containers. So now let's make this plant happy once again. So now that we removed our Cattleya orchid from its old, inappropriate, wrong container, what is the next step? You should remove majority of the old growing medium. Majority, best is to remove all of it. It has been decomposing. It is not fresh. Look, they shoved sphagnum moss in the middle, bark around, and styrofoam on the bottom. That is definitely not the right growing condition for this orchid. So use your fingers. Remove majority, if not all, of the old growing medium. Some pieces will be stuck to the roots. You do not want to damage the roots. If that's the case, if you cannot gently remove the old medium, you might have to soak your roots in tap water in your sink. That will help re-moisten the roots and help you get rid of this old medium much easier. Look at these big chunks which I'm actually pulling out. Now that you have removed majority of the old medium, you have a much better look at the plant's root system. So what do you want to look for? You want to look for the green root color. Green means it's still alive and it's healthy. Now, you might see some roots that are not green. Some might be beige, some might be yellow, some might be off-white. That doesn't mean that those roots are dead or damaged. So how can you tell if the orchid plant's roots are in fact dead? Very simple, guys. You touch them. The roots should feel firm and solid to the touch. If the root is hollow, here's an example of a hollow one. I am touching it. There's nothing inside this root. And in fact, it's very mushy to the touch. Here's another one. There's nothing left internally to this aerial roots. You want the roots to be firm, hard, stiff, almost to the touch. Those are healthy, light roots. So what do we do with the hollow roots? What do we do with the roots that are dead or dying? We use clean pruning shears or scissors, and we will cut them off right now to give a better life to our orchid plant. Look at the orchid's root system now. I got majority, if not all, of the old medium off of it. You can clearly see all of the roots. You can have clear access to all of your plant's roots. Look how much old medium I was able to remove from this one single orchid. So now, what you need to do is, again, you feel for hollow, mushy roots, such as this one over here. There's absolutely nothing left to it. So you take your clean, sterilized scissors and you cut this root right at the base, as close to the mother plant as possible, like so. What do we do with it? Nothing. We throw it out, guys. We discard of it. Anything that's still firm to the touch, regardless of the color, we don't touch. We only remove the dead. A good tip, guys, if you see some of the roots are very, very dark in color, almost black, most of the time, 95% of the time, those are the dead or dying, rotting roots. So do look for the darker color pigmentation on the roots. Now, we want to remove all of the old, mushy, dead roots. And you could see I'm removing quite a few because unfortunately, by mixing all these mediums in the old container, they caused quite a damage to this plant's root system. And I want this plant to get the best chance at life. Look at all these. All of these aerial roots are exposed. They're starting to peel their outer cover. That's not a good sign either, guys. This plant was not a happy plant whatsoever. So now, once you have removed all of the hollow, dead or dying roots, what is the next step? The next step is to get your new container, of course. Right over here is our container. You must start to pre-fill it with new orchid fir bark. Very simple, guys. All you do is you place it inside the container. I like to fill in about 3/4 of the container first, then attempt to place the orchid in the center and see what the situation looks like, and then start to backfill the rest, backfill the top. Now, if you don't know from which side your orchid is growing, from which direction it will start to produce new buds, you're better off placing that orchid straight in the middle, because you do not want to put that side too close to the edge and obstruct your orchid's plant's growth. There are various reasons as to why you want to repot your orchid. Whether you got it brand new like I just had, and again, you don't know what medium this orchid was growing in before, and take a look for yourself. This was not the right medium. You want to grow your orchids in a medium with which you're comfortable with. Another reason is, like I said previously in the beginning of this video, if the current growing medium is too old, over a year, over 2 years, you do want to repot it, as the old medium starts to decompose, disintegrate, and it will not be the right growing medium for your orchid plant. I have pre-filled my container about 3/4 way. I'm going to place the orchid. You want to place the roots like so, comfortably, like that. You spread out the roots. You place your orchid in the middle, as again, I don't know from which directions the new buds will start to grow from. And I backfill with the bark. You want to give it a light tap. You do not want to damage the roots, guys, by all means. Light tap. If some of the air roots are still exposed on top, that is absolutely fine. Orchids love that. They want the aerial roots to be slightly exposed. In fact, I'm going to leave one exposed right over there. I'm not going to totally bury the air roots. Now, you want to make sure that the orchid is secure in the new container. You do not want to see your orchid wobbly. You do not want to see tilting in one or another direction. That means you did not pot it correctly. Give it a nice, gentle tap on the medium, whether it's bark, whether it's sphagnum moss, doesn't matter. You want it to feel snug and secure in its new potting container. Now all you have to do is water it thoroughly. Allow all of the excess moisture to run out into the saucer. Spill out any excess moisture into the sink. And place your Cattleya orchid in a well-lit, warm, tropical-like location. This is it for this video, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here in my home in Long Island, New York, Zone 7A. In today's video, I gave you all the easy, yet proven Cattleya orchid care and repotting tips. I gave you step-by-step instructions as well as demonstrations. For those of you who enjoyed the content of today's video, if you found today's video to be useful, helpful, informative, show me that support, guys, by clicking thumbs up below. Leave your comments in the comment section as well. Let me know, do you grow orchids in your home? What kind of orchids do you grow? Do you grow Cattleya orchids? If so, how do you care for them? What kind of a growing medium do you use? If you haven't yet subscribed to my gardening channel, Gardening Cold Spring Harbor, what are you waiting for, guys? Super easy for you to do, super pleasing and rewarding to me. Go below this video and click the subscribe button. Click the bell icon as well if you want YouTube to send you notifications every single time I'll upload a new garden video. Guys, I'm just so excited that I was able to give this Cattleya orchid a new growing home. I can't wait to see it grow and bloom for me. Be healthy, guys. Be happy. Stay warm and cozy during these cold winter days. And happy gardening, guys. And I'll see you again at my new upcoming garden videos. Bye, guys.